Well, Danny, thanks very much for coming in today to speak to us about the partnership between CEDR and Sanofi. Before we get going, could you just tell us a little bit about you, your background, and your role at Sanofi?
Sure, yeah, thanks. So first off, thanks for inviting me in. It's been an exciting few months for us working alongside CEDR to launch the project, obviously, that we're going to talk about. But from my perspective, I've been with Sanofi now for 2.5 years. I came to the company under the advice of the current Chief Compliance Officer, who was one of my previous colleagues at a previous company. Spoke really highly of it, said, we have this new role for you. So I said, okay, what is it? And he said, it's Global Head of Organisational Justice and Smart Assurance. And I said, and that means? And he broke it down and explained it and explained what it entails, which is internal investigations, our global monitoring program, our global speak up program, the oversight for corrective and disciplinary action, and the Ombuds office, which wasn't a thing then, but they were talking about what else could be included. So I came in to take that role. Prior to that, I was with another pharmaceutical company called Amgen in the US for 7 years. Then I had 3 years at BP Oil International in a business integrity team. And then prior to that, I had 20 years in law enforcement in the UK, various kind of investigations roles, 8 years in London and 12 years outside of London.
Yeah, amazing, thank you. And so look, I mean, broad remit now at Sanofi, a lot of big business challenges as well. So where does the work that you've been doing with CEDR, the building the capacity and capability in the ethics, business integrity, compliance, speak up, where does that fit into the wider business strategy?
When the CEO, Paul Hudson, who's been a real support for us on this and backed the Ombuds program from the start, when he came in, they set up with Julian a what they call EBI 2026 strategy. And it was linked from a company strategy to a ethics and compliance strategy, but that was linked into the cultural transformation of the company. So it wasn't just about changing ethics and business integrity, it was about changing the way the company thinks, operates, behaves, and acts across all the spectrum, so not just linked to compliance. So part of that was what they call our play to win strategy, which is very focused on taking risks, what they call thoughtful risk taking, pushing the boundaries, but testing and challenging current working practices to maximize the return that we can make in terms of performance and obviously ultimately what we can do for patients. So that was kind of where the two linked in, and part of that environment and the cultural transformation was, okay, how do employees feel about the company? Do they feel it's fair, consistent, balanced, and equitable? So that was where the organisational justice piece started to take shape.
And what were the specific capacity or capabilities that you were looking to build in order to meet those broader business objectives?
Speak Up's the big one, for me it is, and I think that's very closely linked to the Ombuds office, because one of the main goals of organisational justice is, do you feel as an employee you have a voice? Okay, yes. Do you speak up? If you speak up, are you heard? Does the company listen? Does the company take action? Do they share what the outcomes are of the action that's taken and share that learning across the organisation? Prior to coming into Sanofi, I think there was a real mentality, and probably a lot of it in other organisations, I've seen it in previous companies, that speak up is linked to reporting misconduct. And that fundamentally was the thing we changed around the transition, because we created what we call our Speak Up universe, which is centralised around psychological safety, intent and integrity. And that is the kind of core part about how an employee can feel safe to speak up in a company, about sharing ideas, giving feedback, challenging the status quo, improving the ways of working, and then raising concerns. So all those are kind of pivoted around that central concept of psychological safety, integrity and intent. And that's the bit that we're really trying to push to make employees know that they do have a voice, they can speak up, they are heard and listened to, and the company will take action.
So very much taking a human-centric approach to this capacity building within the organisation. Now moving on to look at the partnership between CEDR and Sanofi. So why did you decide to work with CEDR, and what have you seen the benefits to be so far?
So the concept of Ombuds came up in a meeting I was in with one of our business units, and a couple of the people in there had previously worked for another company that had a similar kind of, I'll call it Ombuds office within that company. And they said, oh, you know, have we thought about what Ombuds is? And my understanding of Ombuds at that point was always it was an external service that you could go to if you chose to, not an internal one. So we said, okay, this could be an interesting concept, because we have a lot of issues that people have in the workplace on a day-to-day basis that are disputes or minor conflicts between groups, could be clashes of personality, management styles, employee management, whatever it might be. How do we resolve those in a sensible, effective way that people feel the company helps me resolve issues without it always getting escalated? And what we'd seen and what I was aware of is that quite often a lot of those issues that start off that could be managed and resolved quite quickly before they get more serious are left and they kind of fester, and then what could have been managed early becomes a bigger problem. Then it gets reported into, say, the helpline, then it needs an investigation, and the time and effort and energy that takes quite often way outweighs what the original issue was if it had been raised and identified it soon enough. So that was the thing, right? How do we operate this? How can we deploy the right people? So we looked at some other companies that had got similar schemes in and tried to understand more. What does an Ombuds office do? How would an Ombuds office internally operate? How do they manage the concepts of independence, informal, confidentiality, those kind of concepts that are real pillars about what an Ombuds office should be about? So we did some research first to try and work out how does this fit in this company and how big does it need to be? Because we thought you could put 2 people in it, but all of a sudden you might have a couple of thousand people raising inquiries, and those 2 people are going to be swamped.
You need to build the capacity.
Exactly. So that's where we came to CEDR. We did a bit of research. Funny enough, your colleague Steve had just literally by chance, around about the time I was looking at what the Ombuds could be, had contacted me on LinkedIn and said, I see you've got quite an interesting job title, going back to what you said. Yeah. Can you help me understand what it is? So we connected, had a conversation. I started to explain what our kind of idea was. And it just started to build momentum from then. Then obviously once I'd met Steve and the team here, I was like, yeah, these are the right people. You know, you've already established mediation, remediation, the skills that you offer as a company were exactly where we wanted to kind of bring that knowledge and expertise in.
And there have been various components of the partnership right through from the development of the Ombuds service, the recruitment for the people, through to the training and beyond. So could you just talk us through some of the various steps and where CEDR's been involved at each part of that journey?
I mean, I would say you've been pivotal pretty much from the start. So the idea came out, what does this look like? And I'd got 3 people in my team who we would identified, and we'd said, right, if we're going to build this, you guys can be the leads on it, with me kind of overseeing it. So Estelle, Marco and Wand, we got around the table and said, okay, let's how's this going to look? And we'd started to see, and spoke to other companies to say, what challenge have you faced? Did you get support from the management level or the senior execs level to start it? Because again, it's that buy-in, that support at that level. Otherwise, you can create something without that level of buy-in, and then you're going to struggle to get it really off the ground, particularly in a big organisation. And Sanofi is 90-something thousand people, so it's a big boat to turn when you're trying to change something. So we said, right, okay, concept like it. Who do we pick? And we didn't want to have people just aligned to ethics and business integrity or P&C, which is the historic perspective on where those kind of skill sets might sit, because it needs to apply for the whole of the organisation. And one of the things that we were, I would say, concerned about, one of the things that we wanted to be clear on was that the Ombuds don't do investigations. And the people that I have currently overseeing the Ombuds office are also investigators within the company. So we wanted to avoid that blurriness of, well, you're an investigator, I'm coming to talk to you about something informally. How do I know you're not going to take this and go and start an investigation? And what are the kind of the parameters that an Ombuds office will work within to resolve an issue versus something that the company needs to identify as a serious risk that we have to manage kind of more formally. So there was a lot of planning out what sits in the remit of an Ombuds versus what sits in the remit of investigations versus what sits in the remit of, say, risk or something else. And that's where you guys came in, CEDR. We sat down with Andy and said, look, what do you see in other companies, and how does an Ombuds office, an internal Ombuds office particularly, how do you see it shaping up? Because that was the bit. It was, okay, there's external, full-time, internal, we were going to struggle to have it full-time. So we said, right, we need a broad spectrum of people. So we thought we need a broad spectrum of people because we've got a really diverse company in terms of people's heritage, in terms of the backgrounds they come from, the experiences they've had in their lives, but also in the company. So we wanted to say, let's have it as broad as possible. So we put an application, job description together, working again with CEDR themselves, and we said, well, okay, we're going to struggle here to just select 20 people. We need to test that they have the right skills, understanding, maturity, experience to do this role successfully. Because there's an element of autonomy about the role itself as well. Even though we have an Ombuds office, the Ombuds themselves, once they get allocated to an inquiry, it's very much for them to manage independently and resolve out with the skills they've now obtained from the training with CEDR. So we went through a recruitment process, put the advert out. We had over 200 applicants, 240 something I think. And we were thinking, right, let's go for about 20, because that gives us a nice bit of scope. If it takes off well, and it seems to have done so far, even though we've only been live for a month or so, you know, we can spread the work around. We've got a vast pool of people there in different places around the world, different languages, different experiences, different locations, that we can really be truly independent and allow the employees the choice. And that was the other thing we wanted to do. I don't want to have to be told I have to speak to Danny or to whoever, and I'm not an Ombuds. I oversee it, I'm not an Ombuds. So we set it up in a way that they can select, and provided that Ombuds is free and available and has bandwidth, the inquirer, the employee, will get connected to that person, and then it's up to them to discuss the issue and manage it. So the process of training, going back to the point, we've identified our 20 and said, okay, Andy and Susan were heavily involved in the interview process, because we had a role play part to that too. Because it's quite difficult, as I'm sure you know, right? You try to pick 1 or 2 people or 20 people out of a 45-minute Zoom interview. They're not always coming across in the way that you might like them to, or they don't maybe even present themselves the way you'd like to. So we set up a formal kind of interview, and we said to them, you're going to have some questions, some answers, tell us a bit about yourself, skills, background. And then we had a mini role play as part of that process to kind of gauge what that person's thinking was like, how they saw conflict, how they saw dispute, what their thinking was about how alternative ways could be used to resolve something instead of just escalate. And the feedback we had and the insights from the CEDR team were fantastic. It really helped with us to identify the right 20 people. Those 20 were then chosen, and we said, okay, backing again, like I said, right from the Paul Hudson down. So they came here for 3 days intensive training with Andy, Felicity, Tracy, and were given insights to what the role meant, what being an Ombuds meant, the types of resolution tactics you could use, and the purpose of that was to give them the understanding and the foundations before they did the second part of the training, which was a 2-day modular training, which was more intensive and more about role playing, being kind of put under a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, that's critical, isn't it? You've got that role play, that pressure, because when they're doing this in real life and people are coming to them with serious, complex complaints that might be highly emotional or very much linked to their sense of identity and individual self, they need to be able to be comfortable in those challenging, pressurized situations.
And I think where CEDR really, for me, when I sat and I oversaw the training, I participated and watched it, and where I really learned, and I think the team did, because the feedback we had was fantastic, was that the CEDR team really shared the options. It wasn't about you can go in and fix everyone's problems. Not everything has to be a mediation. There are ways of you being able to talk through an issue with an employee where you empower the employee, give them the options and the solutions that might be available to them, and they can then decide, actually, I'd like to go down that way, or choose this one. And there may be some that end up with mediation. We've said that all the way along. But it's about kind of, here's the menu of options, and there's no one size fits all. Yeah. And that, I think, is where the experience of the group that we selected has really come into play. Because when we had the first day here, and it was kind of flip charts, and ideas about what could it be, they really started to kind of open up and think, this is way broader than what we even thought. So I think after those 3 days here, they really kind of felt, wow, this is the thing, right? This is not just, let's call some people as an Ombuds. Yeah. There is a process here. There is a set of learning to be done, and skills to be taught and enhanced that will really allow us to be part of a significant team of people that can help drive that cultural transformation in the company going forward.
And then we're recording this in August 2024. So if we take a snapshot of where you are right now, you've got a team of 20 Ombuds people from how many different nationalities?
I think 13.
And how has it gone so far? So you've just launched, and already you're seeing some positive early successes.
We are, yeah. So we set it up. again, it came after that we were talking about the Speak Up campaign that we were doing, which again was the whole broader Speak Up universe understanding. And we said, well, this is fundamentally part of that, because we want people, if they have a problem, if they need some advice or guidance, to be able to say, okay, can I come forward and have a safe, confidential discussion? And that was where the Ombuds came in. So we linked the Ombuds to the Speak Up, and we've created a portal, company-wide portal, where an employee can go in, they can directly be taken to the Ombuds portal, understand what it means. We've got the charter on there, rules of governance, some FAQs to help them understand, well, what about this? Did they take these types of things? And obviously, a little biography of each Ombuds and a little video, so you can kind of go in and think, well, actually, I might work in manufacturing supply. I'd like to speak to this Ombud because they've got manufacturing supply experience, or I'd like to speak to someone without any insight to my area of the business because I want that really independent assessment. So yeah, we set up the portal with the 20 of them on there. They can make their inquiry confidentially through the portal, which comes to the Ombuds office, so the team, the core team, completely confidential, completely safe site, and it'll get allocated out. So that's how they contact and can reach out to the Ombuds. They're not hidden people, they're out there. We've asked them to go out. The communication is highlighting them as our Ombuds team of 2024, class of 2024 as we call it. And yeah, we've started. So we launched 1st of July. We're 6 weeks in. We've had, I think, something like 20 plus inquiries already. Outcomes are still open, so there's been some resolution done. The feedback I'm getting from everyone who's had the presentation and everyone who's now reading about it and understanding what it means is, this is fantastic. As a company, we needed this. There's too many situations where either the manager of overseeing a problem might be slightly conflicted, so doesn't necessarily have the independence or maybe even the skills at times to manage something properly, or might be part of the issue. So bring in this external, independent, neutral person in to say, okay, let me hear what you have to say, hear what you have to say, right, how can we come up with a solution? Yeah. And they can, there's multiple different ways that an employee, they don't have to be known to the outcome. So one of the things we spoke about was, I want to raise an inquiry, but I don't want, maybe my manager never listens in meetings or shouts down at me in meetings. But I don't want them to know that it's me putting my hand up. Okay, so as an Ombuds, they can say, right, well, we can manage that. We don't have to say, hey, Danny has said this is a problem to the manager. We can come up with a way of managing it. So, for example, training to the whole team, a communication session to that part of the function, which doesn't identify an individual person, but allows the message to be taken across. The manager involved would be part of that training. So there's ways to resolve things. It doesn't always have to be two people sitting in a room, for example.
And just to wrap things up, because it's been a great conversation, for people thinking about embarking on something like this, I know you said a lot of companies have things similar, some don't. What would be sort of your bits of advice that you've learned from this process, sort of 8-9 months ago to present, that you would give to them? For people sort of
I'm not going to lie. When I wind back 10 months, however long ago it was, and someone said Ombuds, I was like, okay, my previous company had it listed as somewhere you could go to talk to people, but what exactly do they do? And you hear like financial ombudsman and other ombudsmen in the general kind of public, but I've never had to use the service of one. So again, a new experience for me. So I think understanding and educating yourself, if we're going to do this, what are we trying to achieve? What are our goals here? To just resolve lots of minor problems, to prevent them becoming worse, or do we want to have employees who feel like, yes, we have services in the company where I can go to, trusted, reliable, informal, confidential. So I think you need to understand what you're trying to achieve, because you've got to try and set yourself up for success. And I think that's where we've been really, really fortunate with the support and the guidance and the buy-in we've had from our executives. Our Chief Compliance Officer, Julian Duran, has been right 100% behind this from the start, which again is a huge, huge help, because you start to build something that there will be challenges, but you can discuss them, you've got the support, you can find solutions to get there. And the biggest thing for me was engaging the right partner, and CEDR was the right partner. We looked at, just did I think like a Google search on mediation companies, but I'd already had the connection with Steve. We looked at it. There's some really good information that we were given, you have on your website, but also by talking to the team. And then we sat down. Estelle, who's our Ombuds lead, came with me to London. Sat down with Steve, with Andy, with Susan and discussed, okay, what is this going to look like? Before we'd even started the job application process. So building the blocks of success were really important, and CEDR brought the expertise, the understanding, the insights from other companies. This worked well, this didn't work well, and it's quite unique because I'm not even sure, I don't think they've done anything like this in another organisation. So it was a first for them, a first for us, but the partnership, the lines of communication, the ability to feel comfortable to say to Andy, and it happened mid-training, we need to just shift this slightly, just because I think the group aren't quite ready for this next bit, so can we adjust it? Bang, agile, done. And that afternoon, for me, I think it was the first day of the training, was really pivotal in the rest of the training for those 2 and the 4 day, the 2 modules. Because the group suddenly, if we'd put them into what was being planned, I think it would have been too soon for the group. So we adjusted it, so Andy and Felicity adjusted it with Tracy, delivered a slightly different session, but man, that had such an impact on the second and third days. And you could literally see the penny drop with the group, and they go, yes. And that night when we went to have dinner, they were like, fantastic. Oh, this is way bigger than I thought. They were so energized, and they still are. You know, we have groups, so massively reliant on the support we had through CEDR at the start, without a doubt.
Well, fantastic. Dan, it's been great to speak to you today. It's great to hear about the success you've had already. I'm sure you've got great success to come, and we look forward to hopefully the partnership between CEDR and Sanofi continuing. And yeah, it's a fantastic journey and a lot of great things to come.
Excellent. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.